Hi folks, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Thanks for joining me. I want to do a reading update for Friday, August 2nd, 2024. Haven't done one of these in two or 3 weeks, I think. So let's get caught up. I have some new acquisitions to share. I have some bookshop updates, like some new bookshops I've been visiting, and some little library finds and some completed stuff to go over with you. So first, let's start with the books I've completed. First up is Vacuum Diagrams by Stephen Baxter. I've already deposited this at a local little free library now that I'm finished with it. This was a library sale find, and it's a mass market paperback, and it's a far future linked story saga of human what happens to humanity in like the next 5 million years or something like that. And it's definitely hard sci-fi, so it's just filled with astrophysics and hyperspace jumps and all kinds of like technology and science, and it's very heavy on explaining all that. And it's a little bit scant in the characterization development department, which is generally what I prefer. So I guess I'm not like a super hard sci-fi fan. I had a similar reaction when I read one or two of the Ringworld books by Larry Niven. Like a really cool concept, but having all that science and technology and engineering explained to me like doesn't really like get my jets going. But anyway, it's not that I wouldn't read a Stephen Baxter book again, but I would definitely be reading the reviews and sort of seeing what the buzz is about it before investing the time in it. So I'm glad I got through it, but I'm also glad to be on the other side of it. Enough said about that. How about some updates on Plutarch's Lives? Plutarch's Lives. Well, I finished the Cicero biography. I also read the biography of Demetrius, who was a Greek leader. And I just today finished the Antony life, Mark Antony, which was fascinating and great storytelling. And then he has a comparative essay between those two lives. And the Antony life tells the whole story of Antony and Cleopatra, as well as like so many other things with the Civil War and the fighting against Caesar, Augustus, and all that. It's like lots of family drama and interesting stuff, like really, really interesting character study. And I got thinking about Shakespeare, because we know that Shakespeare wrote a play, Antony and Cleopatra, and a lot of, not a lot, but like I'd say a good handful of plays that Shakespeare wrote derived from Plutarch's Lives. And this is making me want to revisit some of those Shakespeare plays. So one would be Antony and Cleopatra, and then another would be Julius Caesar, then there's Coriolanus. And another that kind of came up in the Antony life was this little sidebar story that he tells about Timon of Athens, who was this notorious legendary misanthrope. And it turns out that Shakespeare wrote a play, Timon of Athens, not one of his more famous efforts, and it's thought to be a collaboration between Shakespeare and Thomas Middleton. And I thought, wow, I want to read like this play again, because I don't have much of a memory of it from the first time through. And the story of Timon is, as Plutarch tells it, is definitely intriguing, and I would love to see how Shakespeare handled that. So this is going to send me off maybe on some tangents in the near future, going to Shakespeare, hopping ahead to him from Plutarch. I'm still going to keep my eye out for the Thomas North translation of Plutarch, which is the edition that Shakespeare would have read in Elizabethan Times. And apparently he cribbed a lot of that for his plays. He really mined it. So anyway, that's that. Now, there's a couple little free library finds I want to share with you. One is this book, The Civilization of Rome, by Donald Dudley. And this is just sort of a general history of Rome, and some of that overlaps with some of the Plutarch's lives I've been reading. So I've just dipped into this and kind of skipped around and looked some things up in the index. It's a nice little volume, but I don't think I'm going to read it. I'm going to give it back to the little free library. I just thought it was cool to stumble into it while I was in the midst of reading Plutarch. I love serendipity. The other is this book, Hume, by Rudyard Kipling. Hume, this is maybe one of his more famous novels. Some people regard it as perhaps his best novel. The backstory with Hume for me is that when I was growing in the 10th grade honors English class, we had a reading list, a summer reading list, and I still remember most of the books on that list. And then there were some books that we read during the school year. Well, Hume was on that list. I can't remember if it was on the summer reading list or if it was just one that we read in like the fall, but it was in a different edition, and I'll see if I can find the original paperback cover to share with the video. But I'd never finished it. There were two books that year that I didn't finish. One was Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. I read the classic comics version of that. And then Hume, which I maybe read 1/3 to 1/2 of, but I know I didn't finish it. And I kind of always regretted that. And it was one of these books where the setting was a little too exotic for my little minuscule suburban Philadelphia brain to handle. And I just couldn't quite access it. You know, that's on me. That's on me. That's not Kipling's fault. But now that I know more about Eastern cultures and have, you know, read more books about India and books that come out of that tradition, I think I'd be a lot more interested to see what he has to say here. If any of you have read Hume, like, share your thoughts on it. But Kipling is not an author that's in vogue, to say the least. I mean, defender of colonial imperialism and all that. But he was a pretty good writer. Like the little writing of his that I have read, I've been impressed at his style. You know, he knows how to tell a story. But I read some interesting facts about his biography that intrigued me. And here's another little bit of serendipity. He spent a few years in Brattleboro, Vermont. And he lived in this house, which you can actually visit, and I think you can stay in it. It's a pretty pricey rental, but you can stay there. And it's just outside Brattleboro, Vermont, in southern Vermont. And this is the house where he wrote The Jungle Book. I didn't know all these details. I had a vague memory that he had spent some time in Vermont. Also, Solzhenitsyn lived in Vermont for a while. But yeah, it was kind of funny to pick this up at the time because it was just right before that we went up to Vermont. We went up for a long weekend last weekend to visit my daughter, who lives in Windham County, southern Vermont, about 35 minutes from Brattleboro. And we spent time in Brattleboro. We looked at a couple bookshops in Brattleboro. And I wanted to recommend these stores. I didn't buy anything at these stores, but they were both really great. One's called Everyone's Books, which is a new bookstore, independent bookshop, really cool, lots to look at. And then right across the street from that is Brattleboro Books, which is a pretty good-sized used bookstore, like lots and lots of books to go through. I didn't find anything. I was moving pretty quickly, and I didn't, you know, it takes me a long time to browse for books, but I didn't find anything to buy myself. My wife bought a couple things at Everyone's Books. But Brattleboro Books had a limited editions club edition of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Limited edition books club was one of the George Macy companies who also did the Heritage Press titles that you see often in the bookstores. The limited editions club books are rarer. They were truly limited editions. And this was a pretty cool looking book as I pulled it off the shelf, but it was priced very high. Most of the books in the store were very affordable, but this one was not. This was like, I think they were asking something like $200 for it. So I put that one back on the shelf. It's out of my budget. But anyway, went to those two bookstores, and then while I'm on this trip theme, on the way up to Vermont, we took a rest stop in Saugerties, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley, right off the Thruway, and in the shadow of the Catskill Mountains. It's a beautiful area. And so I had never been in Saugerties before, so it was I was curious to look at it. And it's a cool little town, and they've got some cool, funky stuff going on there. There's a nice hippie vibe to the place. And we stopped at Inquiring Minds bookstore in downtown Saugerties and spent about 20-25 minutes browsing that store. And really cool bookstore. It has a coffee shop like inside of it, and really recommend that you check them out. They have books and records and all kinds of cool stuff, chairs to sit in. It's, my kind of bookstore, probably your kind of bookstore too. So anyway, that is sort of my book journey. I didn't really buy any books on the trip, but we had a lot of fun browsing those stores. And then I picked up this book that's been on the shelf for quite a while, and I've been reading it. I started to read it, and this is Lawrence Durrell, Mountolive. I say Durrell because I'm from Philadelphia, and we tend to accent the second syllable in a name like that. So I apologize for that. I think the proper pronunciation is Durrell. Whatever, Lawrence Durrell, I'm not going to train myself to change it. Anyway, this is book 3 in his Alexandria Quartet. I first got exposed to Lawrence Durrell as an undergraduate. I was assigned in my modern British novel class the book Justine, which is book 1 of the Alexandria Quartet. Came out in the late 1950s and had a lot of fame. Durrell was pretty popular back then. And then it's a 4-novel series, and it all is like kind of an ensemble piece where you have all these characters interrelating to one another and love affairs and intrigue and stuff. And each book seems to be written from a different perspective. So a couple years ago, I reread Justine, and liked it a lot. And then last summer, I read. Maybe this was actually both these books were last summer. I also read Balthazar, the book 2 in the quartet. Mountolive is book 3, and book 4 is Clea. So this comes from a box set of hardcovers that I have down in the living room. So I thought, I don't want summer to go by without reading some Lawrence Durrell, because for me, he is really becoming a favorite author. I just adore his prose style, his storytelling, his set pieces, his way he can describe a place. He really takes me to that whole Mediterranean world. And everything I've read by him so far has been really enjoyable. And a few years ago, I read his entire Avignon Quintet, which is a 5-series novel, if you will, 5 novels. And loved that. That was really cool. And I've read a few other books by him, and everything's been really enjoyable. It makes me think of this Joe Spivey YouTube episode that I watched. I think I just watched it yesterday, where he was saying how he's been in a reading lull, and are there any like lifesaver authors you go to when you're floundering? And I would say Lawrence Durrell is one of those authors for me. Like I pretty much know I'm going to like any book I pick up by him. And I have most of his work collected, and this one took about 15-20 pages to get into, but now that I'm into it, I'm about 50-60 pages in. I'm liking it. I'm back with these characters. It's really kind of cool to see it from a different point of view, and we'll see how it goes. So that's currently being read. I also went back to this book, The Great Ideas Today, 1970. So I've gotten some inquiries on my YouTube channel about this since I've been covering the Great Books of the Western World set by Britannica. These are a set of annual publications that came out where they give you like what was going on in the intellectual and artistic culture that year, and they would get different people to write these articles. There's symposium pieces where you have people kind of like dialoguing with one another, and then they have additions to the Great Books library, and they're really fascinating time capsules. So I want to do a series of videos on these, so I won't talk much about this one, but I've read all the 1960s annuals. I'm up to 1970, and this has been like by the bed for months and months, and I haven't really picked it up. In fact, I didn't even have a bookmark in it, but I kind of remember where I left off. So I just finished the literature overview chapter, which was written by Kenneth Rexroth, and that was good. So I'm going to keep dipping into this, and stay tuned for more videos about the great ideas today. I did buy a few new books too, so I wanted to update you on that. At one of our local bookshops, it's called Baldwin's Book Barn, which is a cool bookstore. It's an old barn that goes back to, I don't know, possibly colonial days, and definitely the 1800s. But it's filled with books, and it's a really cool bookshop. It's been there for a long time, and I go out there maybe once a month to see what they have. So I picked up a couple Penguin classics there. One is David Hume, A Treatise of Human Nature. I have not read any David Hume, and the David Hume that's in my Great Books of the Western World set is not this book. So the one that's in the Great Books set is his famous one. Is it called Inquiry into Human Understanding or something like that? But this I think Hume thought of as his major work, A Treatise of Human Nature. So I thought, well, this was a good price, and let me stockpile it. And if I get into Hume down the road, I'll probably want to read this. But it's definitely a back burner book. And there he is on the cover, by the way. Looks very well fed. Also, I got Voler Zadig and LIngénue, 2 short novels by Voltaire. Couldn't pass this up. It's a really good condition. Penguin Classic was affordable. It was either maybe $5 or something. And I like Candide. Candide is one of my favorite novels. And I thought, let's read something else by Voltaire and give this a shot. So because this is short, I probably will get to this sooner than later. So that's fun. And then this last book was a book I got at another local used bookshop called Second Reading outside of Westchester. And every now and then they have these leather-bound copies, and they always have stuff like that. And I like to kind of scout the store for those. This is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. And it's the Easton Press leather-bound edition, which is, you can see the book plate from the previous owner. And this contains the author's original illustrations. Over 200 illustrations in here. And I thought, well, you know, if the price is right, I'll get this because it's in pristine condition, near fine condition. And it so goes that they only wanted $11 for it. So I thought that was almost a steal. Because if you price this online, you're probably going to pay double that at least. So, hey, I support the local senior center by buying books from them. I'm always dropping off books there too, donating them. So let's get a nice leather-bound copy. It looks great on the shelf. And I'll get back to this. I have read Vanity Fair, so this would be a reread. I have this, I remember vividly the edition I read. I don't have it any longer. It was one of those Reinhardt editions, paperback. I've never been a fan of those. Like, they have very dull covers. They're not like a whole lot of fun to hold in your hands. It did have, I think, the original illustrations though. But anyway, it was a bit of a slog for me. Vanity Fair. The one compelling thing about that book that I remember so vividly was Becky Sharp. What a great character she is. And but I felt like by the time I got to the end of it, I felt like I had missed the boat a little bit. Like I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to enjoy it. So I was a bit crestfallen. But it's a book I want to come back to, because I have seen a few booktubers talk about Vanity Fair in the last few months, and they had nice things to say about it. So I thought, well, maybe I should give this a second chance, and I probably will like it better coming back to it. That happens a lot with books, doesn't it? And this will be a lot of fun to hold in the hands and go through. It's pretty heavy, but it's a very nice edition. Easton Press, leather-bound copy. So that is, I think, catching me up for my reading. What have you guys been reading? And do you have any comments about these books I've shared? Put your 2 cents in the chat barrel in the comment section. And thanks for watching as always. If you're new to the channel, I hope you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Till next time, happy reading.